G'day, Anders Sorman-Nilsson here, futurist and the founder of the think tank Thinque, Stockholm and Sydney based. Today broadcasting for today's future trend spot from the kind of iconic vista of Pudong of Shanghai here behind me, with a Pearl Tower to my right and the vista over the Bund. Here in a city kind of transformed by the latest and greatest in real estate thinking. I've been spending time here in this old fishing village, now potentially one of the sort of most futuristic and most quoted and most iconically itemized and imaged vista of any kind of city around the world when it comes to the idea of the future of cities. Chosen as the location of the Cushman and Wakefield Leadership Conference for their Asia Pac Leadership Conference, where I've been keynoting for the last few days and hanging out. Now, the reason they chose me as a futurist was to really discuss some of the disruptive trends that are going to be impacting the idea of commercial and corporate real estate into the future. And many of you viewers and our subscribers on the Think Tank channel wanted us to really discuss how the idea of physical space will shift in a more tech, virtualized and cloud-based future. So this trend spot today from Shanghai is really here to kind of provide you with some insights and a peek into the future, as it were, into the future of commercial and corporate real estate. Three trends that I want to discuss with you during this trend spot is firstly the idea that yes, everything that can be digitized will eventually be digitized, and as a result, importantly, the very interface that we have with work is going to change. So firstly, the idea of transforming interfaces and different user experiences of work, something that is clearly going to impact the way that commercial and corporate real estate needs to think about the future. Secondly, the idea of on-demand coworkers. No longer in the future will we have massive payrolls. Instead, those payrolls are going to go up and down and be agile and kind of expand depending on what the demand for our business is. And as a result, through digital platforms, we will be able to tune into some of the latest and greatest of professional talent from around the world globally. Again, the need for space, the idea of densification, and also the idea that you have to be physically available for work in an office will be challenged as a result. And thirdly, the idea of collaborative consumerization. Not just collaborative consumption of space where you might co-share a hotel room like this, or where you might even choose to have your business travel via Airbnb to somebody's apartment in Shanghai, and thus utilizing and optimizing already existing space, challenging the very notion of inventory and how we use it, but also the idea that increasingly the consumer style of technological platforms is changing the game in terms of what we expect at work and how we want to use both tech and physical resources at work. So let me kind of guide you through those three concepts here for just a moment. Firstly, the idea of transforming interfaces. The user experience of work needs to change. In fact, one of my colleagues, Jason Fried from 37 Signals, says that there's a reason that work doesn't happen at work. In fact, he says that the most productive we are is either in the home, maybe when we're on the airport, maybe when we're in a cafe, but when we're constantly interrupted in the workplace, in an open plan office, for example, we don't really get anything done whatsoever. We just sit in meetings. But because of digitization and because Generation Y and a cohort of digital natives who speak technology without an accent are now taking over the workplace, the interfaces that we use to access work are changing. Trends towards telecommuting are indicating that people want to spend time at home doing work or even doing a teleconference on their way to work. Increasing amounts of business travel around the world is indicating that yes, we want to see each other face to face, but we're living in a globalized society where increasingly we're mobile, we're on the road, and we want to access our work via our smart devices, our phablets, and our tablets. The very interfaces of how we access work is shifting, and businesses need to be aware of these shifting interfaces to ensure that they, yes, both connect with increasingly kind of digitized rational minds of the digital natives, but also keep connecting through those interfaces with the enduring and perhaps later to retire baby boomers. For those, we need to get them into the digital world, but also recognize that there's value in the old school. For example, Marissa Mayer, CEO of Yahoo, and also the CEO of Best Buy, ended their previously heralded and much tributed results-only work environments and chose to bring everybody back into the physical workplace to change the corporate culture. What we can glean from this is that yes, the digitized interfaces of work might be phenomenal for transformation of information, or transfer of information, I should say. But real human and cultural transformation may still need to happen in the physical world. The tablets and the interfaces we use at work or away from work, or even the way we think of work and life as separate, is going to change. And as a result, corporate and commercial real estate professionals need to be aware that we are currently shifting the way we access information and the way we think about transformation and growth. The second idea that we discussed at the leadership conference was the idea of on-demand and the changing nature of your co-workers. So on-demand co-workers, and some of those co-workers in the future may not be exactly the type you had expected. In fact, they may no longer just be human. Robots are coming, in other words. But let me just kind of explore this idea of on-demand co-workers. BMW did something fantastic when it was planning for its aging workforce a few years ago in Bavaria, in Germany. Now at BMW, they noticed and they asked themselves the question in terms of their workforce planning: how will our demographic of workers look like in the future? And they asked themselves this question, and as a result they put together a team of 50-year-olds. They knew that by the year 2020 the average worker would be 50. So already back in the late 20noughties they put together a team of 50-year-olds to study how they worked, what their physical reactions were to work, and they asked them the question, how would you be more productive at work? And they came up with a range of solutions, such as, one of the guys said, you know, my barber in Germany, he has this stool that you can raise or lower depending on how tall the customer is. As a result, he doesn't have the same kind of back problems that I get on the production line. Now, together with a range of initiatives like these, BMW put in place little bar stools that were ergonomically friendly. They also shifted up the work so that workers would be doing different tasks throughout the day, and they found that over the course of a year that the productivity of this team went up 7%. No longer was this just a demographic baby boomer workforce planning initiative, it actually became a firm-wide initiative to boost productivity at BMW. Now, I think this story is quite beautiful, and I think more companies should employ futuristic and forward-thinking initiatives like this to plan for the workforce of the future. But my big question here is, are human beings really going to be doing that type of work by the year 2020? This is 5 years away. And now we have computers and robots like Baxter, a $25,000 robot, doing a lot of this work and learning through artificial intelligence very, very quickly how to do tasks and how to perform even better than human beings. And they're not going to complain about a sore back in the future. The other idea here, though, is that increasingly, as we get comfortable with outsourcing work to other countries because of globalization and productivity pressures and the simplification of business process outsourcing, and as we get more comfortable accessing talent from other countries, including our own, increasingly we're seeing both blue-collar and white-collar work being outsourced on various platforms, such as Legal on Demand or Innocentive, a scientific and a legal platform for accessing the best white-collar talent to ensure that you don't have to have a workforce on the payroll, but you can quickly scale up when the work comes in. Now, this is raising a host of questions. You will see in some of the political debates about Uber, for example, and the taxi unions around the world trying to shut down Uber, really a reaction to this on-demand workforce where the Uber drivers are not necessarily on anybody's payroll, but they're doing work for a bunch of hours, utilizing their time in new ways, and giving people like me who travel around the world 200+ days a year access to a great service, beautifully branded, all around the world, a seamless experience for me as a traveler, and something I opt for any day of the taxi experience, which can be very, very disappointing around the world, I know from experience. Now, that on-demand digital platform for talent is going to change the game when it comes to commercial and corporate real estate. Because imagine you don't have to have a bunch of legal partners or even people doing digital due diligence in your workplace, because it now happens, as I mentioned, digitally. You might have even a computer doing digital due diligence for you, like Xerox, one of my clients, is facilitating. Now, increasingly, algorithms are doing due diligence for us as lawyers, and as a result, your need for space in your office is not going to be as high. Now, I remember working for a firm in Australia back in 2003, if my memory is not inaccurate, and I was asked to do due diligence, comparing the Therapeutical Goods Administration Act of that year and the previous year. Two chunks of legislation this big, sitting with one page like this. And of course, as a young digital native, as a Gen Y, I asked the question, isn't there a piece of software that can do this instead? And the question was, no, we haven't invested in that software yet. And secondly, my follow-up question is, when does this need to be finished by? And they said Friday. This was on a Monday. And I said, does this going to involve any kind of client contact or human interaction? They said no. My question was then, well, can I do it at home? The response, no. We work here so we can ensure that we know what you are doing. Now, this is the old school version of management and leadership, but of course for a generation of digital natives, this is not going to stand in the future, particularly as these digital natives are now moving into management positions and working differently, much more comfortably to socially collaborate with talent from all over the world. So watch these platforms and ask yourself, how is your workforce planning in tune with on-demand platforms and the fact that increasingly your co-workers in the future may not just be human but also increasingly robots. In a bunch of industries around the world now, there is massive investment both in agriculture and in manufacturing into robots. They are long robots and short human beings. And increasingly this is a trend that's also of course impacting white collar work, as we've just pointed out. The New York Stock Exchange is largely electronic. Increasingly now, financial advisors from around the world are freaking out because algorithms are able to rebalance our investment portfolios for us without the need for a human being. And because of narrative science, increasingly profit and loss statements don't need, at the end of the financial year, a human being writing the report. Increasingly that's being done by artificial intelligence like narrative science to tell the story of the annual report. And of course, now that Watson is starting to meet with Siri, our beautiful little app on our iPhones or our Android devices, their equivalent, we are now able to maybe even switch away from executive assistants occupying real estate space and instead having Siri and Watson make all of our flight bookings for us or change our appointments. This should be freaking some of you out. And for commercial and corporate real estate agents, it begs the question, what is our need for space going to look like in that disrupted future?